welcome to episode 172 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, my friend, how was your week? How's your weekend? How's everything going for you?
Shane, I've had a great weekend. There's a new local game store down the street from me.
Well, what?
Yeah.
An L local GS?
Yeah, well, they don't host games, they just sell games. It's a new gaming goat.
What?
A new gaming goat opened down the street for me, and I went in there yesterday and I bought, as you might see above me, the Azorius Spirits Pioneer Challenger deck.
I have one of those. Yeah.
$20.
Wow.
Whoa, that's
good pricing, gaming goat.
They have all the Challenger decks for $20. I wonder if I should get the other three.
Yeah, just flip those.
That's
just
half of
constantly
what I
flip
paid
them.
for the ones that I bought.
Also, that's the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
Dave Harbarger, who pays too much for Challenger decks, apparently 6 months ago. But I've had them for a while, so that's good.
Yeah, you got time value out of those, Dave.
I really have enjoyed just clutching them close.
On this week's show, we're going to give some early impressions of how the new cards from Streets of New Capenna are impacting our formats. We're going to talk about Modern, Pioneer, and even Explorer.
A little bit.
I mean, probably more than anything almost. That's like the format I've been playing the most. Spoiler.
People aren't going to be happy to know that, but that's probably true for me, at least since last week. So
yeah, we're going to also kick off with a breakdown of two different challenges, one in Pioneer, another in Modern, and then we're going to do our best to focus on the new cards from New Capenna that are appearing in decks in tournaments. And then in the dive down, we're going to talk about what we've been playing as we try to test new cards, give some of our first impressions on Explorer, see what's caught our eye and imagination in the first, 5 days since we've had access to new cards?
at most, it might be
3.5.
Yeah.
I guess when do they hit MTGO? Tuesday?
Thursday?
Wednesday, I think.
Okay.
Thursday.
Yeah, so
yeah.
4 to 5 days.
Yeah. Data was slim going into this episode in terms of what to play, but we let our imaginations and our hearts guide us.
Yeah, we really didn't know what else to talk about that people would want to hear this week, right? So we're going in with our own experiences.
I thought we'd just do a follow-up episode, like 6 better ways to get even better at Magic.
Yeah.
Like, level 3s, because, I thought we just left a lot on the table there. I thought that, we didn't talk about
hydration. We didn't talk about bringing granola bars. We didn't talk about snacks. We didn't talk about bringing light-up play mats.
Yeah, I'd love to start a part 2 of that episode and kick it off with forget everything you've ever heard about how to improve at Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Some real clickbait.
That's the title, though. People will touch that title for sure. They will digitally touch that title.
What Platinum Pros don't want you to know.
Number 4 will shock you.
Yeah, before we get through our clickbait listicles, let's get through some housekeeping. Shout out to the newest patrons to join the Dive Down Nation. We got Tristan C. and Jacob L. Thank you both. We also got a couple of new reviews. One from Einherjar23 and another from Grixis TCG.
Grixis TCG, not sure that you should take us on a first date or to a children's birthday party, but we are happy to help you become a middling to average player. Absolutely, that is our mission. You've nailed it. Thank you for taking the time to review us.
So they're better than us already.
Yeah. And Einherjar, you mentioned you want to try to get some more Pioneer local events in Chicago. Check out this new gaming goat on Irving Park, right by Joe's. David, remember when they opened that scary LGS that looked like a trap?
It was sort of like an angry guy.
Yeah, an angry guy who just opened baseball cards and sold Magic cards out of his old decks.
Yes.
It's literally directly across the street from them.
Wow. God, I'm so annoyed because I
it's
just moved away from there.
Two game stores just like facing one another, and one of them is really creepy, and I would not recommend going into. And the other one is a charming gaming goat that sells a bunch of board games and stuff.
Creepy game store, get at us. Sponsor our podcast.
I do live in a city with a good gaming store now, at least, but I waited forever for a store to open in that neighborhood that I used in Irving Park over there. And wow, just after I left.
So it always happens.
So as Stan mentioned, we have a couple new patrons this week. If you'd like to join the Dive Down Nation, become a citizen of the nation, get into our definitively discreet Dive Down Discord, get some swag coming your way, you can go over to patreon.com/thedivedown. And, like we say, a little as a buck a week is kind of the entry level. If you want to do that, that's awesome. If you don't, we will always be here for you free. You help keep us going. You help support the content we create. And support kind of the stuff that we get to make, like, these deck boxes that are eventually coming our way. We have other projects that we have worked on through your help, upgraded our gear, been able to attend a tournament here and there that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get to and cover. So we appreciate all of you all out there.
And if you'd like to support us while playing Magic online, you can check out Mana Traders, of course. ManaTraders.com is the best way to rent Magic cards to play your decks. It's what we use. It's what we've always used for testing here. And if you go there, sign up for the first time, and use our code, the Dive Down 2022, you will get 15% off your first 2 months of rental cards. That's manatraders.com. Now, Stan, you have something exciting to talk to people about a little bit today, right?
David, you're right. I do. So what I'm holding up in my hands, the Twitch viewers can see it. The podcast listeners cannot. It's a giant pink Magic the Gathering branded backpack. The backpack collection groweth.
That is the pinkest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's be clear. It's like deep black with like pink piping and accents, and then giant sort of armadillo like panels on the side.
I mean, it's very Kamigawa vibe, right? And I think that's what the
Neon,
collection
baby.
is. Am I right? Neon density.
That is correct. It is the densest backpack ever. People out there might be asking, did Stan get his hands on a Kamigawa Platinum collection from Beetle and Grimm? And the answer is yes. I did not pay for it, but I did get my hands on one. A very generous gift.
Right. Thanks to your recent work with Polygon.com.
Hashtag sponsored.
Yeah. I mean, so interesting. We didn't get, we're not sponsored by Beetle and Grimm, so it's not like we got a placement from them, but you did receive this present from Polygon.com for your work recently covering Magic for them.
Correct. Yes. My very friendly and generous editor hooked me up. And what we're going to do is give away some of the stuff that I received. Now, mind you, I am keeping some of the stuff because a bunch of it is amazing.
Super sick.
I got a necklace. I got a ogre's head necklace.
It's good. It's good.
That's number one.
It's bringing strong energy to the tournament tables with that.
Guys, I'm not even trying to be funny. Whenever I put it on, my wife gives me the nastiest look. just so much hate in her eyes when I put it on. And I'm keeping it. I got a light up playmat. I'm keeping that too.
Light up playmat. I think you should Google this if you haven't seen one before, because it is truly a sight to see.
It's incredible in the truest sense of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do have plenty of stuff I am excited to share. Details to come on exactly how we're going to distribute this. Going to try to do something fun, but I'll hold it up for the camera and my co-host can describe some of what they're seeing.
Oh, a lovely art print of one of the dragons. Oh, there's Junji, two dragons, 3 dragons. It's all the dragons.
Is that the original Magic art, or is that like... Yeah, that's the original. That's not Magic art. Okay.
Yeah, these are nice prints of the dragons.
Correct. Really nice prints of the legendary dragons from Kamigawa. This, I think, is a really hot commodity. I'm going to have to stand up to show you what this is. It is a giant print of a map of Kamigawa.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Oh,
How
it's
big this
huge.
is. Yeah.
Put that in the living room.
Hang your ogre head necklace off of it so that you're... Yeah, that's wonderful.
Isn't that ginormous?
That's attractive and ginormous.
I think this will look pretty nice framed if you like Kamigawa. I also got a giant print of the March of Otherworldly Light art.
Oh, great.
Oh, which one? They're all pretty cool.
The main one, not the alt one. And I'm also keeping that. I'm going to frame that for my child's nursery because it's so cute. Here's another thing I'm giving away that I think people will really enjoy. A dual deck box.
Nice.
With like the pink neon piping.
That's right. I've been testing it out myself just to make sure it works. Look at this.
It does in fact hold cards.
It stores 200 card commander decks.
Oh, nice.
With plenty of room for other stuff. And then it's got the second compartment in the middle, or it's a third compartment that you can put dice and tokens and little life wheels.
Reminders to yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to hide.
Notes for later.
Yeah.
Cliff bars.
That's great, Stan. I mean, I think that what we'll probably do. So, are we encouraging people today to like maybe keep an eye on our Twitter if they want to participate in the giveaway?
Yeah. Last but not least, I got sleeves. We'll give away some pretty nice art matte sleeves.
Who makes those?
It's branded Beetle and Grimm.
Wow.
Yeah, but they're clear, right? So it's not like how sometimes like the Eclipse sleeves are a little opaque.
They're a little, yeah.
These are more like Dragon Shields. totally clear, and the back with the art is there's a lot of friction on it. So you don't have to worry about your cards slipping and sliding the first time you shuffle it over at the LGS and be like, I'm sorry, new sleeves.
Fresh sleeves.
Yeah, new sleeves.
Cool. Yeah. So if you're not already following us, go over to twitter.com/thedivedown. You can find us there, or search the Dive Down or whatever way you have to find us on Twitter.
Bing.
And we'll try to engage you there.
DuckDuckGo. We're going to do a bunch of giveaways. It's not just going to be one person gets the sweet stash. We'll try to just share the wealth with as many people as possible. Void where prohibited.
Yeah, terms and conditions may apply. You can send Stan a self-addressed stamp envelope to enter if you don't want to purchase.
I kind of only want to give this away to people in the lower 48th because mailing outside of the country can be hard.
Yeah. We'll post some restrictions like that on Twitter probably when we figure out how we're going to determine who gets this, unfortunately. Yeah, but just go and follow us there. Keep an eye out for it. We'll tweet something about it in the next week or so.
Well, this has been some great audio material.
Yep.
So I'm going to just tee this up to Dave, who's going to start us over on the news desk this week.
Yep. I'm going to get into the breakdown today. So we thought that we would start with a Pioneer Challenge for this week. I know that many people in the nation recently have been paying attention to Pioneer. I know Stan and Shane have both been playing some Pioneer. I've mostly been observing still to this point, but we thought we would go through this challenge. It's Saturday, April 30th challenge because there was some interesting stuff about this one. We're going to start right off at the top. We're just going to go down through the top 32 meta, talk about some notes, what we think about what's going on, and look for new cards from Streets of New Capenna here. And in first place in this Pioneer Challenge, we had Housekeeping on Mono Blue Spirits.
Whoa!
They finally won one with Mono Blue Spirits. No new cards in this. Oh, actually, 3 unlicensed hearse in the sideboard, I should say. So there were some new cards in this one.
Nice.
Little Graveyard Hates and a little crew, too, that you can use if you want to make a giant creature. But you know what? I love this deck. I'm going to play this deck. I know that nobody does well with it other than Housekeeping, but I love all these cards. I just want to play Curious Obsession. Is that so wrong?
No, it's just right. No rules.
I have a Curious Obsession with Curious Obsession. Any thoughts?
Dave, it's my favorite Devo song.
Yeah.
So the unlicensed hearse is interesting because I don't think they really had like good aggressive graveyard hate in the past in this deck.
No, I don't remember seeing any before.
Besides artifacts, but
yeah, because you
can't
play
a creature artifact.
Can't play Skoos. And Dave, do you know off the top of your head how easy is it to convert a challenger deck to this one? Because this is like one of Pioneer's cheapest strategies at this point.
So the deck does not have Ascendant Spirit in it. It does not have, but it does have Mausoleum Wanderer and Rattle Chains, I think. And it does have Supreme Phantom.
You'd likely just be better off just like clicking add to cart on TCG and just buying it, right?
No, unless if you can get one for $20, it's probably worth it for the Rattle Chains, Mausoleum Wanderer, and Supreme Phantoms to get 12 of those, because I bet those are $2 a piece. I mean, remember we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and this was like a $70 deck in paper, and I think if you can get a head start with those 20 cards and go for it, plus then you also have a chance to move over into blue-white if you want at some point in the future, so you can have there's a couple of spell quellers and things like that in there. There are Brazen Borrowers in that deck. There's at least one. Yeah, and that helps too.
Yeah, I also heard something really cool about playing this mono blue deck and why it runs Geistlight Snare instead of actual Mana Beak. I can't recall what other podcast I heard this on, but definitely credit goes to someone that isn't us. But if you go turn 1 drop, all right, so in this case, like it's Ascendant Spirit or Spectral Sailor. Right. Turn 2, play a land, put the Curious Obsession on your 1 drop. You can hold up your Geistlight Snare as a 1 mana leak.
That's great.
Which seems pretty good.
It's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, so in some ways you have 6 Spell Pierces available to you then, because really that's what Spell Pierce is for as well. So that makes a ton of sense. I mean, yep. Love this deck. I really would like it to be actually good. Let's see where it goes from here.
I've got a Curious Obsession. Boom, boom, boom.
Second place, Las Vegas Chaos on Winota. It's a stock list. From what I've seen, though, that was new to me anyway, is everybody just jamming Prosperous Innkeeper in these lists now. I think it makes a lot of sense, of course. It's a ramp It's another ramp spell, essentially, with your treasure token. You can gain some life off of it, and also it is not a human, so it gives you a...
Yep, it is a citizen of the Dive Down Nation.
It's a halfling citizen is what it is, so it gives you a... it's not a human citizen, so you get that Winota trigger when you attack with it later on. Third place, Ale MTG, blue-white control, pretty much stock, but it's Yorion. So we've talked in the past about how some of these decks run Yorion, some of them don't. From my view in the bleachers, not playing a ton of Pioneer right now, it seems like I see more Yorion lists in these high-end results, like challenges and stuff like that. But just worth noting that this is a Yorion version. Fateful Absence, I've also seen both here and in Explorer right now out of these blue-white decks. I guess mostly to get rid of resolved planeswalkers. I know that most people think that card is bad, generally speaking, like kind of like the worst of all possible worlds of a removal spell. But I think it's kind of a necessary evil right now, especially with where planeswalkers are going these days.
For sure. Like, it just allows you to trade up on mana, even though you get the investigate. So, like, sometimes it's just like, if my opponent is going to have a Chandra or like a Sorin is gaining so much value, like, we just have to remove this thing.
Yeah.
And the card off the top is potentially worse than a Chandra in that matchup.
Yep, absolutely. Fourth place, Sandy Dog MTG. Well-known player. Guess what? Sandy Dog's playing mono red. Surprise, surprise there. I think this is a deck that you two have played here and there, but haven't really picked up since we were in Dallas, right?
That is correct, yeah.
What do you think about this deck? I mean, I know that you guys faced it much in Pio lately, or?
I faced variants in Explorer, and while being less powerful than this, I think they have game, and we'll talk more about that, I think, when we kind of get into the dive down segment. But I think this deck does what it does consistently, and I think that Sandy Dog's list here definitely focuses. It doesn't try to go into like sort of the mid-range, like with like multiple Chain Whirlers and Torbrins. It's more lower to the ground. The more I play with Chandra Dressed to Kill in both Historic and in Explorer, I actually haven't played her in True Pioneer yet. I know you have, Stan. But the +1 to ping and add a red mana is just the peanut butter to the Spectacles chocolate. Like, it just works so nicely. It's a perfect like 1-2 combination with so many things. And even if you don't have a Spectacle card, plussing up to add an additional red mana when these decks run 22 lands, then you can cast like an additional spell for Prowess trigger. You get that additional Play with Fire, or you just get another one drop onto the board, and it really does a lot for a little.
Yeah. Worth noting that this deck has 24 single mana spells in that spot. So if you have plussed it to do damage, there's 8 Spectacle cards, and then there's 4 sets of 4 of other cards that you could play with that single mana, which is very nice for sure, like you said, to be able to play this out on 3 and then drop something else as well. I do love Chandra Dressed to Kill. 5th place, McWinsauce, another excellent Magic Online player that we're all familiar with on Mono Green Devotion. To me, this is a pretty normal deck, I think, but what do you think about it?
No, this is weird. Like, I looked at it and then I was like, what's going on here? They have 3 Branchloft Pathway and they have 4 Temple Garden for a white splash. And the white splash is supporting sideboard cards, 2 Portable Hole, a Tulsimir Friend to Wolves, which is the 2 green-white elf scout that essentially what makes a couple permanents, gains you some life, does a little bit of removal. So it's kind of a good anti-aggressive card, which this deck does need a little bit of shoring up against some aggressive strategies I've found. And then Cloudsteel Kieran, 2 and a white artifact creature equipment Kieran. It's one of those reconfigure cards. It's a 3/2 flyer, and if you equip it, it gives the equipped creature flying and the text, "You can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game." So that's the Platinum Angel text. Is that correct?
Yes, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So what I find perhaps weird about this is, like, I'm trying to figure out what this is doing, because it does not do the thing that angel token card or angel counter card does, right? Like, it doesn't just like sort of lock the opponent out.
I think it's to combo with Nissa, Who Shakes the World ultimate, where if you can ultimate Nissa and then grab the Cloudsteel Kieran, put it on an indestructible land, you've locked out your opponent.
No, they could just have artifact removal and kill the artifact. Kill the equipment. They could just kill Cloudsteel Kieran.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then they need artifact removal.
Right. I think it's just a cool option to be able to grab with Karn,
Yeah.
basically. It's just pretty interesting. And Portable Hole is an interesting thing to be able to grab with Karn as well. So you can run a game plan where if you don't think they have artifact removal, or if they're in a spot where they're not going to have access to it, then being able to lock them out is a good move. This is just a bunch of novel Karn targets to me. Of course, Tolsimir is not a Karn target, but yeah.
It's just kind of value. Yeah, I didn't actually catch that. I didn't remember that these are then Karn tutorable. I was like, I guess they're just sort of value options, but like you could run a lot of things in the spot of Portable Hole, but being able to tutor it is really good.
Yeah. Speaking of other weird things that are Karn tutorable, what's up with Pestilential Cauldron in the side of this deck? Is this also because it's Karn tutorable and then you cast the back side of it? You cast the green sorcery side instead of the artifact, or do you actually want the artifact sometimes?
So you can combo with this.
Okay.
Stan, have you seen this combo? You're experienced with it?
Yes, I actually scooped to someone after they presented the loop to me yesterday.
Yeah, please, and then explain it. You're fresher than I am.
What's interesting about it is that when my opponent did the loop, they used a Heart of Kieran, which is not present.
Yes, that's a good way to do it. It's a little bit easier.
It's
tutorable.
Not present here, but in general, you can create a loop if you have Karn and I think Kiora, and
you have to have multiple, because like basically you use a legendary rule to effectively, and you have to make enough mana, and you have like 2 Kioras and 2 Karns available to you, and you effectively can gain a bunch of life, I think, and then you cast the backside of Pestilent Cauldron, which like mills your opponent for how much life you've gained. And so it's a certain way of, if you have access to a very particular board and graveyard state. What's interesting about the way the Heart of Kieran works is it does not require you to have a legendary rule issue, because you can just keep crewing Heart of Kieran to kill your Planeswalker and then get it back out of the graveyard. So that's how it kind of gets around that legendary thing.
What are you guys talking about? How does this work?
It's super confusing, and it takes 5 million clicks. I actually think it may be the clickiest combo I've ever seen.
Because the backside of Pestilent Cauldron is called Restorative Burst, and it just puts 2 cards back in your hand and then it exiles itself.
Okay, so here's how this really works. Okay, this is from a conversation 2 weeks ago. You cast the backside that gains you 4 life and gets back 2 walkers, Karn and Kiora. With a Karn in play and possibly Kiora, and you have like 9 mana available, you can cast Karn, get back the exiled Cauldron with Karn. Use Kiora to untap Nykthos. You do this loop until you and your opponent have gained life equal to or greater than the opponent's library. Then you cast the Cauldron and use the ability to have the OP mill cards from the top of their library for life, for the life you gain this turn. So I had it actually a little bit backwards. I apologize.
The second mode of Pestilent Cauldron says 1 tap, each opponent mills cards equal to the amount of life you gain this turn. So you try to gain so much life off of Restorative Burst that you mill your opponent's deck in a single turn.
Yes, and you can. The interesting thing is that Pestilent Restorative Burst exiles itself, which then allows you to get it back with Karn, because it's an exiled card outside the game.
That is some weird stuff. Okay.
I don't know who figured that one out.
It's for long games. This deck isn't trying to get to this state. It's kind of in there when you've like hit a wall against a particularly grindy opponent, and then you basically find an opening to like cast this and don't have to worry about a counterspell or something else.
Wow. This deck. I hate Mono Green Devotion. Okay.
I'm curious. I want to pick McWinzauce's brain to see what they felt about this White Splash. It's the first time I've seen this in this deck. So,
well, he does talk to people on Twitter, so go ahead and reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Mono Green Devotion is my most played against deck in Pioneer right now. I feel like it's incredibly powerful and incredibly popular, and it's, barring any significant changes that come from New Capenna, I feel like this is kind of the deck to beat right now, as well as Winota, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get to Winota in a moment.
Yeah, people have been really gravitating toward it, and it's tough. Like Cavalier of Thorns and Old Growth Troll they're friggin' hard to kill. Excuse my language.
6th place, Muriel Marcos on Is It Phoenix? The one new card that we've seen in this top 8, I believe, is the Single Strangle that has made it into this deck's main list. Other than that, I don't remember seeing any other Capenna cards in this particular top 8, but there's more to talk about with that too. 7th place. Wow, I'm not going to say this. XF13RC, we see you, on Winota. Oh, the other card that was in this top 8 that was new, I forgot about this. A 2 of Rocco Cabaretti Caterer in Winota.
Cool.
Yeah, why not? Naya gets another creature.
Yeah. If you get a bunch of mana, you can go get something else. Like, say you want to go directly to getting your Huntmaster this way, you can just go do it.
Rocco is an elf, not a human, even though you might think a caterer from, Cabaretti. I don't know.
It's also, they have an Ornithopter in here, so you can play Rocco for 3, grab the Ornithopter, and that's another Winota trigger when the Ornithopter
sure
attacks.
is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get those 0 drops. Interesting to me is that the card that it looks like they shaved for this is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So I think that most Winota lists I feel like I had seen have had 4 Fable in them, and this one is cut down to 2 in order to fit some of these other things in it. So people still innovating on this list.
For 3 mana, you get 2 permanents.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Yep. Totally. I mean, hey, that's what we were saying the other day. We just didn't, with the food thing, we just didn't realize that it could happen with here in Pioneer as well. The other thing that's interesting for what it's worth is that I saw in 16th place in this same challenge, there was another player who was on Winota, and they had 4 Mage's Attendant main. This is the other piece of innovation that I saw in this world. Mage's Attendant is the card that brings in a cat warrior and then also comes with a mage that you can sacrifice to basically force spike something, to make a non-creature spell that costs 1 more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice little onboard counter to help protect Winota if you get into that situation as well. Stan said Mono Green Devotion might be the deck to beat, but I will say that this particular tournament, the top 32, 7 of the decks were Winota decks, and including in the top, which is 25% of the meta basically. The top 8 also had 2 Winota decks to make it 25% of the top 8 meta as well.
Yeah, deck's good.
Yeah. Now, 8th place, Super Cow 12653 with another new card in it that I forgot we were going to talk about. So just forget what I said about not many new cards in this top 8. No reason to have said that. Giada Font of Hope in here, making Selesnya Angels a thing in Pioneer.
Yeah, super, super strong card. And that's just, if you've forgotten, it's the 2 mana 2/2 with flying and vigilance that makes each other angel you control ETB with an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each angel you already control. And if that wasn't enough, might as well be able to tap it to add white to cast an angel spell. That's a very powerful rare.
Yeah, incredible card. And this one is also running. Interestingly, this one is also running the Book of Exalted Deeds Mutavault combination as well. So it's even kind of doing a little bit of having a control plan, not a control plan, but a really
lockout
oppressive plan, a lockout plan. Yeah, thank you. That kind of idea as well. So there's a lot going on with this Angels deck now.
Yeah. Dave, you're a graphic designer. Is that Times New Roman on Giada, or it's not Papyrus?
Wait, where's the typeface?
The font of hope.
I think that my font of hope is Helvetica, but everybody sees their own thing.
Yeah.
Papyrus.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good pun, Stan. I love it. All right, so let's talk about some other notable things outside of the top 8. Well, first, actually, what do you guys think about that top 8? How's it sound? Is interesting? Where are your heads at right now?
It's diverse.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's like seven decks. Pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, I think Pioneer is like very close to being really darn good. I think what's interesting, I mean, it's really darn good, I think, in general. But what's interesting here is like Format Menace Lotus Field has not shown up here. We did get, I think the one that's right behind, if not in front of it, would be Winota, would be people's kind of number one.
Worth noting that there were 2 Lotus Field decks in the top 32, but neither one of them was very highly placed.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pioneer it's an interesting time because enough people are at their typewriters, typing stuff, and that they're gonna create the next great American novel. Which this is a strained metaphor for a lot of people are playing it, and we're gonna, I think, see more and more what's winning, how people are iterating, what the new cards of New Capenna do. There's a lot of forces at work in Pioneer right now, and I think that's a really great place to be.
I'd love to just take a second to stand for Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Sure. I've played a lot with it this weekend. First time I've really cast the card.
Yeah, it wasn't until we started looking at Pioneer again that I've come face to face with this card. And A, it's super popular in the format. And B, it's fantastic. It's just, it does so much. Even that first mode, like the 2/2 that makes a treasure every time it attacks, is like, you kind of want to have to kill the token sometimes because it generates so much free mana for them.
I just keep thinking about it like, I mean, it has lots of pieces of the Buffalo that make it a fit for different kinds of decks, right? Yeah. But I just keep looking at it, thinking about it like it's Seasoned Pyromancer. Basically, I'm like, okay, Seasoned Pyromancer in some formats that don't have access to that card. 3-drop that gives you 2 creatures and lets you Faithless Looting is pretty great. Unless you Faithless Rummage, I guess, realistically, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the end state, if they don't interact with your tokens and things like that, where in, let's say, Rakdos Mid or something like that, where you have a resolved Kroxa, and you're copying Kroxa or something bonkers like that, or even less bonkers, like just anything like a flipped over, whatever, the Graveyard Growler or whatever. Yeah, the flipped version of Trespass or anything like that, or a Bone Crusher Giant. There's just all sorts of stuff where it's like, yeah, I love copying this, and I love copying it to get an ETB or something like that, and it just does a lot of work. I even saw a Yorion opponent that was doing like some Blinky shenanigans, and they blinked. When they did this, I was like, oh yeah, that would work. You blink the token, the 3rd stage token, it's just the other side of the card. So they reset it to stage 1, because I was like, oh, it doesn't create a token, it literally flips over the saga. Because when it happened, I was like, what in the universe just happened? Then I was like, oh yeah,
right, it's not a token, that's the reflection of Kiki-Jiki or whatever, reflection of the Mirror Breaker. It's that good card. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about it a little bit more as we talk about what we played this week. All right, so notables outside of the top 8. I'm gonna go through some of these really fast, and other ones we're gonna talk a little bit more about. 10th place, I thought it was interesting. There's someone, the player's name is Yosugi, playing a black-white control deck. No new cards, really, but I just thought it was really fascinating to see an Invoke Despair, Orzhov, Planeswalker-y kind of deck. Seems pretty cool. 12th place, 11th place, I was going to mention, we have X-Whale, well-known player and friend of the show, I suppose we can call X-Whale. We haven't met them yet, but 12th place, Ivan Drago.
Can we refer to everyone as a friend of the show? Just like start taking credit we have not earned.
6 degrees.
I mean, we've certainly talked about Will/X-Whale plenty of times on here, so maybe someday we'll run into him.
I've been in the same room as him. I've seen Will.
Seen him?
I was just too shy to talk to him.
Well, he was on Red-Black Mid, but no Ob Nixilis. But in 12th place, the next person was on Rakdos Anvil with 3 Ob Nixilis. This person's name was Ivan Drago. All right, so this is the first Ob Nixilis. Are we going to hold our deepest discussion about Ob Nixilis for the
we definitely have to hold it. Like, I keep telling myself that I'm going to play some Rakdos Anvil and like get good with Rakdos Anvil, and I've tried my best. But we'll get more into this in the dive down segment when we talk about our play experiences. This is one of the areas where I am curious, like how Ob feels, because like I think there are a few like juicy targets, but not as many as I'd want. Like for Ob here, like maybe it's just fine on its own. Maybe it's just fine to like, hey, I'm just gonna sack a 1-power creature. I don't really care. I'm gonna sack a Cauldron Familiar. I don't really care. Like it does give me 2 pieces of cardboard.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll be back to Ob Nixilis, the adversary, a number of times today, I'm sure. 14th place, Electric Bob on a Grixis Lutri list. Lutri,
man,
making it close to a top 8 here.
So many one-ofs. I mean, they're all one-ofs, but like the selection of one-ofs that you have to reach to in Pioneer is, it's not super loose, but it's looser than I might like.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing here is that I think the sort of, not shell of this, but one of the main things that's in this deck when you use Grixis in this way is Nicol Bolas the Ravager and Nicol Bolas Dragon God, the Planeswalkers. Now, there is like a Nicol Bolas control deck that shows up occasionally, and so I feel like this is sort of like a tweak on that idea to be able to just also get Lutri in there as well, and very enabled by new Triome, Xander's Lounge.
Xander's Lounge.
Come hungry, leave happy.
Come hungry, leave dead.
Can we talk about Lutri for a second? Like, what's funny is like, we've mentioned Lutri, And there's people doing decks with it. Collins Mullins has been doing some stuff with Lutri. And then I actually read Lutri.
Friend of a friend of the show, Collins Mullins.
Friend of a friend of the show.
Collins Mullen basically left retirement just to play Lutri decks.
But like,
true.
Lutri does one thing one time. Like you flash it in, it copies a target instant or sorcery spell, and you can choose new targets. Like, is that really worth building a singleton deck around? Maybe.
Shane, have you still not learned how good companions are? How good companion the rule is?
Oh, you're right. It's still another piece of free cardboard.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about Lutri making this deck good. It's about that, like, there's so much consistency in the spells you can play in terms of their effect and just the power level of so many of these cards that even as one-ofs, they're fine because you can like play removal on a curve and then play really difficult to answer permanents. And then Lutri lets you copy a spell when you find something, like when you happen to draw into something that's really good for the game.
Yeah. That's
what I think.
Deck also has a high end of the Scarab God and Torrential Gear Hulk as well. So it's
Scarab God.
The Ohio State Scarab God.
All right. One thing I noticed was in 26th place, we got a pretty cool Gruul Monsters, Gruul Beatdown style deck, which is kind of built around ramping off of elves into Combat Celebrant and other creatures ahead of curve, of course. What Combat Celebrant allows you to do is you can exert it to get another combat phase. And it untaps everything but Combat Celebrant. And that works nicely with cards like Reckless Stormseeker, which gives a target creature +1 in haste at the beginning of a combat phase. And then it has all of your usual expected beaters like Glorybringer and Ronus and Werewolf Pack Leader and Bone Crusher. And also has Kiora, which I find like a little surprising to me. Like, because you can draw cards off of your 4 power creatures and you can untap things, but like you can't cheat exert, right? Like you can't like untap your Combat Celebrant and like re-exert it, right? Because exert is just like, it says once a turn on Combat Celebrant for a specific. It doesn't allow you to cheat that.
I think you can cheat exert, but I think that Combat Celebrant is, I think that you could have Glorybringer kill 2 things, for example, with that move. But yeah. But yeah, this is a cool deck. I knew that you would love it when I saw it. I wrote some notes about it, and then I realized that you had already written notes about it. And then I said, that makes sense. Shane loves this kind of stuff. Finally, last couple of things I wanted to mention here were 28th and 29th place were 2 mono black aggro-ish decks. Question. One of them did not have any new cards. It was basically mono black aggro with Graveyard Trespasser. That's the 28th place deck by Roberto777. However, the 29th place deck by MJ23 was mono black with a splash of red for Ob Nixilis and also included 2 Tenacious Underdog as well. So it's basically the deck that you would imagine. This one does not have the Graveyard Trespasser in it, which I think probably would make its way into any optimized version of this deck, but it has 4 Ob Nixilis for you to be able to use in the shell as well. It's there. I'm Ob Nixilis. Yep. I know we're going to talk about Tenacious Underdog too, but that is certainly a card that is seeing play in a bunch of different places right now.
I have a proposal for you. Okay. I know the answer to this proposal, but Tenacious Underdog is not going to be called Tenacious D. Under D.
Dog?
Yeah. Tenacious.
Tenacious Dog.
Shane.
Yes.
A man after my heart.
There we go. Yeah. This is not the greatest card in the world. It's just a tribute.
Yeah, but I will say I like the synergy between Ob and like creatures that come back from the graveyard. Yeah. I think that's a pretty clever application, and Tenacious Underdog is just one way to do that.
Last thing I will note is that 1 mono green Devotion deck in 9th place. I forgot to move this up in the notes, so sorry it's out of order, everybody. The 9th place deck was a mono green Devotion deck that was running 4 of Topiary Stomper from Streets of New Capenna. Do you know what that card does?
Is that the one that draws you a land out of your... Yes, and you can't attack unless you have 7 or more lands?
Correct. And it is a big card, I believe. It is a... Oh, no, it's not big. It's a 4/4.
It's not that great. Like, if it was like a 7/7, I'd be like, this makes sense.
Yeah. This card is weird, but yeah, somebody almost top 8'd with it.
I think I've seen it... I might have seen it in that list, but I feel like I've seen it in other places as well, where people are just like, I love lands.
Well, this deck does love lands.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that's Pioneer right now. A couple of interesting things going on.
Before we go on, I just want to make a funny observation. 1st and 32nd place are mono blue spirits.
Yes, I noticed that too.
It just sandwiched the top results of the tournament.
My favorite Pioneer sandwich.
I will say one of the things that really stood out to me about the 32nd place list was the 1 of Shadow Spear What an interesting card to throw into Spirits, I think, just to make your deck better against some aggro matchups and also just gain some life. Be able to trample through things too with your big old Spirits.
All right, I wrote up the Modern Challenge for Saturday, and we had, thanks Bamsing, of course, we had 122 players, and here's our top 32 meta for Amulet Titan. 4 Hammer variants, 3 were Azorius, 1 was Mono White, 3 4-color Elementals, 3 Teamer Footfalls, 3 Is It Murktide, 3 Living End, 3 Yogg, and then a bunch of one-ofs, including some notable things like Calibrated Blast, Mono Red Prowess, Rakdos Sacrifice deck, and 4-color Tameshi, which I believe was Bob the Dog, a.k.a. notable player Gabe Nassif, friend of a friend of a friend of the show. So let's get into our top 8. We had Danny Bambino on 4-color Elementals featuring Yorion. There's some interesting one of main deck inclusions like Magus of the Moon. Again, 4-color decks just running Magus and Blood Moon style effects. What a life we live in. There's also a Titania.
And a Lightning Bolt, if you want to talk about spicy one-ofs.
Yeah,
one Lightning Bolt.
One Lightning Bolt. And
this deck, just wanted to say real quick. So we've seen some other data. So Shane, you earlier shared the results of the 5K at SCGCon Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
Where I believe that 4-color was one of the most played decks in Modern and one of the ones with the highest match win percentage. Is that correct when we were looking at the popular decks?
Yeah, it was definitely much higher than the most popular deck in the room, as we've been seeing in Is It Murktide, which had a 42% match win rate. But the 4-color Elementals deck, it was 5% of the meta and had a 53.5% win rate.
I mean, that's pretty good. And then also, amazingly, or maybe not so amazingly, the Sunday Challenge was also won by 4-color, very close to this same list, by a player who on Twitter is at Respect the Cat.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I kept looking down, and the 4-color Blink decks that feature Yorion were about 60% and 4.5% of the metagame. So, it's those are always kind of an interesting bleed across, but the Yorion variants were doing quite well at 60%.
Yeah. This deck is good. This deck is annoying. It's still good. And it seems like more people are picking it up as we go into the weeks here.
Didn't it feel like it lulled, though, for a few weeks? I mean, maybe we have to wait until the monthly report to confirm that, but I felt like it was on the downswing for a minute, and people started to realize that some of these Yorion strategies weren't pulling their weight.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think it did really well in Dallas. I think if I remember right, too, it had a good win percentage when we looked at stuff, and then now it's here at SCG and in challenges. I will say I don't seem to face it a ton on Magic Online because I think the deck is prohibitively expensive. It's really hard to rent, and it's really expensive to buy. So maybe it doesn't come up too much in the leagues, but I certainly have faced it enough. It's just not as much as some other decks that you see more. But anyway, that's 4-color right now. In my mind, one of the, certainly deck to beat, or second best deck to beat, I personally think right now. In second place, Shane?
Carlson, C. Carlson 32 on Amulet Titan. Looked like Amulet Titan to me. Third place, Gigi on Teamer Footfalls. A Singleton main deck and 2 sideboard Subtlety. The new meta breaker is here, everybody. Subtlety is back.
Stan, have you played Subtlety much in Footfalls?
Yeah, it was like in the earliest iterations of Footfalls, it was, I think, even main deck. Then it kind of left the fold, and now it's coming back a little bit.
Yeah.
Shane, are you being tongue-in-cheek when you call it a meta breaker?
Yes, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, yes.
Yeah.
You don't like this guy?
You know my thoughts on Subtlety.
It's very good. I got to play with it for one of the first times in I've been playing it in Murktide recently and found it really very helpful.
Nice.
Speaking of.
Fourth place, Daniel Akos on Is It Murktide. Fifth place, Crusherbot BG on, of course, Mono White Hammer. And this, of course, looks like one of Crusher's lists as a few Paradise Mantle, no Springleaf Drum, the Sword of Fire and Ice, the Cranial Plating, the Nettle Cyst main, the sideboard with 3 Defense Grid and some other usual Crusher cards. So Crusher keeps crushing.
I mean, the thing that crushed me about this list is that it has 4 Steel Shaper's Gift in it. Every time I try to buy pieces for Hammer, the best players keep adding more expensive pieces into the deck. Again, I have 1 Steel Shaper's Gift that I was like, I'll pay $30 for this, fine. But, I
might have 3, Dave. If I have 3, I'll sell you 1 real cheap.
Okay, that's very nice.
All right. 6th place, Sad Bruce Lee on 4-color Entals featuring Kahira, which is a different version of the earlier deck. What did you notice, Dave?
Just that this is really much more the 4-color elementals deck. It doesn't have things like it doesn't have planeswalkers, like the Orions does. It doesn't have Wrenn and 6. It doesn't have Teferi 3. This deck has Flamekin Harbinger, so you're doing the search up something, put it on the top to look for answers. This one has 4 Ephemerate. The Yorion list only had 3. That's a little bit of not a huge distinction, but yeah, this is much more of in my mind, this is more elementals kind of beat down than it is trying to control anything. There's no expressive iteration here.
Yeah.
It's really,
Elementals deck. 7th place, Disgruntled Elk on Azorius Hammer, a slightly interesting version with only 3 Memnite and 3 Ornithopter, but kind of the usual assortment of post-Lurrus cards that we're used to.
It's playing Culture Complete.
Yeah, I think that people are starting to play this again as just another powerful option, I suppose.
I think that's become a little more common since Lurrus is banned. Basically, people added it as a get out of jail free with Stoneforge.
It's definitely the only kind of thing. I would only want to play that in a deck with Giver of Runes, which this deck runs 3 of, because you don't want that stranded in your hand.
Yep.
8th place, the Witch King on Living End. Okay, so here, top 8. I mean, I feel like every top 8 is sort of the same, which is hey, here's some decks that we know
modern.
of. Here's modern. Here's some modern decks. Next week we'll see 2 Yawgmoth and some Footfalls and all that kind of stuff. So be slightly different.
Yeah. No, I don't think there were any new cards in this top 8.
Yeah, no new cards that I could see.
Other than Triomes.
Yeah.
That's it. There's some Triomes in the various different decks here and there.
We get new cards as we start moving down.
Yes, there are some pretty interesting cards. And the first one I wanted to mention, because I went through and did the Cool Decks Inc. part of this. So let's someone play the drop for Cool Decks Inc. here.
It's Cool Decks Inc. with Dave the Godfather to tell you about new cards. Yeah.
Cool Decks Inc. Yeah.
Double sleeved.
Good job, everybody. All right, in 11th place, we had Simic Horizon. Don't know what that meant. Is that someone looking for a Simic Horizon? We have one. It's called Watervale Grove or whatever that weird
Waterlogged Grove. Very wet.
Yeah, there you go. 11th place with our first Streets of New Capenna card is Shadow of Mortality. Who knew? And it's in Calibrated Blast.
Hey,
Hello.
that's what you thought.
That's what we thought.
The number one deck you thought it would go into.
Honestly, yes. This is the number one deck that I thought this would go into. I'm a little more wary of when we talked about if this would go in a deck that actually wanted to play it as a real card.
Yeah.
But here, why not? Apparently, upgrading from Blink Moth to Infusion is actually pretty big because it's now 3 of the different hits for Calibrated Blast do 15 damage, where before only 2 of them did, and Blink Moth Infusion did 14, which apparently makes a big difference to some of the pilots. I'm not sure
Dave
why.
says begrudgingly.
Yeah. But I do think it's better, and I do think that's been a little bit proven in early results, especially since we also heard today that Bob49, who's usually known for Belcher, I believe that's their Magic Online screen name, top 8'd the Sunday Challenge with Calibrated Blast as a pilot there. So I think we kind of need to look out for it a little bit, especially if a good kind of known combo player like Bob is picking it up and going with it as well. He'll probably talk about it on his podcast as well, so you should check it out. 18th place. This is where we start to talk about Rakdos mid in Modern versus Pioneer and also Explorer. This deck to me looks a lot like what Rakdos mid has looked like in Modern, but it really bears a strong resemblance to the same deck in those other formats as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of the Rakdos mid after Lurrus's banning, which kind of hamstrung it quite a bit, but you did get the opportunity if you wanted to play Lily. And now it gets the opportunity to play Ob. So
yep, and Season Pyromancer, of course, too. Yeah, I think that this list looks like something really fun for me, so I might give it a try as well. But yeah, first sign of Ob Nixilis in Modern. In 19th place, a deck that I wanted to talk about really quickly, Max Attack, 19th place, Mono Red Prowess. Haven't talked about this a lot lately, but there has been a lot of chat in our Discord about how Prowess is now playing 3 Underworld Breach main as a way to just draw cards and abuse things and maybe lightning bolt someone to death if you have enough things in your graveyard to do it. Apparently it's pretty good, but
I mean, how many activations do you think you really get out of this? Like 2?
Well, I saw a screenshot from, I believe, from this player, Max Attack, on Twitter, where they had, it looked like 10 bauble triggers going in the next turn. So, like, I think that they did their turn, cast a bunch of baubles, maybe made some huge prowess creatures.
Yeah, that helps.
And then went to the next turn and drew 10 new cards off of bauble.
I mean, I just don't know how you fill the graveyard so much. Like, exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard. I mean, I know that there's a number of instants and sorceries, but I just like, the games aren't going incredibly long where I'm thinking I'm going to get like that much opportunity to cast the card plus exile other cards.
I mean, for a mono red deck, it's playing 8 fetch lands, so that's, I think, part of
that certainly helps.
Is you fill up with fetches
and Sunbaked Canyon,
and also just like Sunbaked Canyons, and I mean, I think it's interesting that they're playing 4 Let Up and 4 Reckless Impulse. I think Reckless Impulse has been coming up in these decks, but Reckless Impulse just is another way to fill your yard just by getting some velocity, keep yourself in the game longer, and then you have one more thing to either try to get your card advantage off Breach or find that lightning bolt that's going to kill your opponent.
Exactly. I have not had a chance to try this yet, but I definitely want to. Underworld Breach. Never thought it would turn up in this kind of shell, but here it is. 23rd place. New card alert. 23rd place, we had Amulet Titan with a 1-of Titan of Industry in the main deck. For me, that's very much a kind of like, okay. Also, this deck is running 61 cards, so I think maybe, I don't know if they just threw in Titan of Industry into a list that already existed and just forgot to cut something, but props to them for coming in 23rd. This is Underdog 111.
Let me talk about this 24th place deck. This one's pretty rad.
Yes.
Saddleback Lagok on Rakdos Sack. We've talked about this player in the past for sure, and they are running a few new cards in 3 Ob Nixilis and 4 Unlucky Witness, cards that go together like peas and carrots. This is kind of a more straightforward, like aggressive creature focus than Rakdos Anvil, where this deck is running things like Bloodghast and Lightning Skelemental and Mayhem Devil, Ragavan, Seasoned Pyromancer, the aforementioned Unlucky Witness. So you get this strong board presence and aggressive game plan, along with a lot of value sack fodder for your Ob Nixilis. Like, Stan, would you like to be sacrificing your Lightning Skelemental to Ob Nix to get a 6 loyalty Ob out of the deal?
I mean, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. What a play. That and Bloodghast, as you mentioned, I think like finding these recursive threats to sack to Bloodghast that also just come back really easily, either because you're going to unearth them or get a landfall trigger.
Yeah, I like the fact that this has Goblin Bombardment and Mayhem Devil for kind of your pings. Unearth is a really nice inclusion here because it gets back your creatures from the yard for dirt cheap and their endgame damage or endgame sack fodder. Like, let's say you're at a spot where you're like, I have access to even just 4 mana, and you unearth a Skelemental, and then you sacrifice it to your Ob Nixilis. That's a really clean play to get a lot of Ob value onto the board, or just unearth it and swing for 6 if it's an empty board. So kind of the classic Skelemental type stuff.
Yeah, this deck looks sweet.
Pretty sweet.
Okay, couple decks left on the list here of interesting playing with new cards. 28th place, Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth, noted as being one of the other kind of suddenly best performing decks in the format lately when it comes to events. Not consistently, but often putting up high level results and having kind of like a really high match win percentages when you look at the aggregate statistics. This list in 28th place is running Gala Greeters as a 2-of in the main as a 2-drop. Pretty interesting. I don't know if people remember what Greeters does, but it has Alliance, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on Gala Greeters. create. You get to choose one of a mode when a creature comes into play with it. As long as you haven't chosen this turn. And the first one is put a +1/+1 counter on Galley Greeters. The second one is create a tap treasure token, and the third one is you gain 2 life.
I think the interesting thing with Greeters is that part of the Yogg plan is that you chip away with some like early dinky creatures, and then eventually you combo off with Yogg after you've done more damage to your opponent than they've done to you.
Right.
And I think Galley Greeters helps that first half of the equation where it's just like another threat that actually gets a little bit bigger and buffers your life total for that combo, because you need to have more life than your opponent does to execute the combo. And it just kind of helps glue it all together. Hard to say whether it's like the truth and it's going to stick around, but it is, I think, on plan in its own way, even though you read it and like it reads a little underpowered because all of these things only activate once, but maybe you really only need to activate them like two times to be actually good, and 3 times if you want that extra treasure to do more stuff with on every turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the treasure is an important part of it too, because this deck, I have noticed it runs kind of it has lots of mana, but it wants to do lots of expensive things. And so I think being able to slide into being like, oh, I got Greeters here, I need a couple extra mana over the next couple turns, so I'm just going to get some treasure going as well, makes a ton of sense too. Last deck and last sighting of a new card for me was 31st place from Allosaurus Rider. It's Belcher running an offer you can't refuse as a one of. Now, I think that this is a like tech in a basically a recross the paths kind of spot, right? So it's sort of like, okay, if you know that you're in a situation where you're gonna want a cheap counter spell in your recross pile, then you can stack it.
Can you just stack a bunch of Pact of Negations in that scenario?
I think that it's kind of like a combination of both. I think it's like, can I get more? Can I do more? I'm not sure exactly how it works, but, and also, it's not like, again, this may not be the truth. It might be just something somebody was experimenting with, but yeah, maybe it's in a case where also you don't want to die to Pact if they do manage to pull something off somehow. So, but cool. All right, so that's Modern.
Yeah, I think we're getting kind of the early idea of how people are testing these cards. We didn't see any of the Luxior, I noticed. We didn't see anything like that, breaking things wide open. I don't know what other cards people thought would truly be broken potential. I think we've heard a lot about Ob and Ob being incredibly good, but I don't think we saw that be the case in Modern necessarily. I'm curious how people continue to iterate with that card, and if a Luxior deck is going to get figured out, or maybe it's just not going to be a thing. So we'll find out in the next few weeks, I'm sure.
Yeah, and of course, like we hinted, we might not have talked enough about Ob Nixilis yet, because we are going to be talking about that card a lot in the dive down. So thanks for checking out these tournaments, and stay with us. We'll be right back.
Guys, I realized something. I've been shaving too much.
You're an addict?
Sorta. And here's what happened. Turns out when you use a safety razor, you have to switch out those razor blades from time to time.
Yeah, you do. They don't last forever.
Yeah, and I cut myself. Little gash right here. I had to do that dad move.
The styptic pen or the toilet paper?
Oh, I just use toilet paper.
Yeah.
And I got like a bloody piece of paper attached to my neck while I'm at the supermarket. Oh, sorry, I got some blood on your eggplant. You know what I really appreciate about Barrister and Man that I realized after I cut my face from poor razor blade management?
Yeah.
The aftershave, it's cool and gentle, and it doesn't burn my flesh the way like cologne-based, alcohol-based aftershaves do.
I really, really, really like the aftershave. I used to not like aftershaves because they sort of have like a cheesy, like high alcohol sort of feel and scent. And I was talking to Will about this because I was like, why does your aftershave feel good? This sounds like a complete fabricated story, but this is 100% true. I was like, why does the aftershave feel good? It feels soft. Like it feels like a moisturizer. And he's like, that's a lot of R&D, my friend.
Yeah.
Wow. That's all. That was his answer?
Well, not exactly.
It's
he was
proprietary?
Like, yeah. Well, he was like, it has various other chemicals that are like this. It took us a lot of time to iterate on that. That's basically the long way of saying a lot of R&D.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and Stan, what have you been shaving with? I always want to know what you're using because you have the most particular scent family around you. Yourself and your partner and everything.
Well, yeah, I'm just waiting to finish up all of my lavender shaving soap before I start using the chocolate stuff.
You got chocolate stuff? What is the chocolate stuff?
Well, I haven't used it yet. It's on the way. But
yeah.
Yeah, I've got some inky chocolate and ink, I think it's called.
Yeah, I forget what the flavor is, the scent is called, but fragrance is called.
Yeah. And we're not sponsored by Axe, but I am a proud card-carrying member of the Axe chocolate
Axe
family of deodorants, and I'm excited to finally have a shave product that actually blends with that.
Yeah, I am amped to try some new products. I keep just sort of cycling through the 3 different shaving soaps that I use, and I know that there's some new seasonals coming out, so I'm amped for those. And keep your eye on, if you're not already following Barrister and Man on Instagram, that's a great place to get word on new product releases. Will does like a lot of interesting like Q&A type things. We'll just record a video of himself answering questions that he gets from purchasers and things like that. So you do get a lot of kind of a little bit behind the scenes and heads up on product releases. So if you've already done one order and you're just like, hey, I liked this and I want to get some more stuff, it's a great way to just to say, hey, I know what I want next.
Father's Day, month away or so, get your papa or any male role models in your life, get them a nice Barrister and Man present. They'll smell good.
Yeah.
Honey, I hope you're listening. I need more Barrister and Man stuff.
Yeah, I'm just going to buy myself some. I'm not a dad, but...
Stan, I hate to break it to you, but I know that your partner does not listen to our show.
But if you are so inclined, if you want to check out some fragrances, shaving equipment, body soaps, things like that, Barrister and Man, MANN, use coupon code TheDiveDown2022 for 15% off your first order. We appreciate it. Will appreciates it. And thanks again.
You're going to like the way you smell.
If this is your second order, just let Will know that we tipped you over if you're going for it again, even without the code. That would help us.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks.
So, y'all, we are back, and we just talked a lot about what other people have been playing this week. So I think it's time for us to talk a little bit about what we have been doing. So, what have y'all been doing?
It's funny that you took this intro because I think you've been doing the most, and so I really wanted to ask what you've been doing. But maybe before we get into it in detail, I mean, the main thing that I've been doing is playing Explorer.
Yeah.
For the last few days, and I
Gut feeling. How do you like it?
I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying having a reason to play Arena again. I have complicated feelings about the platform and the economy and all that kind of stuff, but it is nice. I was reminded again that it is nice to be able to pick up and just kind of play on my iPad when I want to and things like that. But yeah, I've mostly just been playing Explorer, and I've mostly been playing Rakdos mid because I wanted to try Ob Nixilis out. And so we'll talk about that some in a minute. But what have you been doing, Shane?
Essentially the same, my friend. A lot of Explorer. I think since we got through the early bumps of the release on Thursday on Arena, I have been only playing Explorer and only best of 3.
Nice.
For fun, for learning. Like, I'm not just trying to grind ladder with an aggro deck in best of 1. I'm just trying to feel out this format with like a slower mid-rangey deck and using Arena to play real Magic for essentially the first time. And it's pretty good. What about you, Stan? What have you been doing?
I've been doing a mix of Pioneer. Been playing some new cards that caught my eye that we've never really even talked about, that I'm excited to kind of share, my experience following my heart, basically. Cool. And I have been doing Explorer as well. I think I've only played it on my phone, and for that reason, only best of 1. But I'm not grinding the ladder. I'm actually doing these new events just to get a sense for like what this event structure is like and what I can gather about the metagame there. Since people do metagame in best of 1 versus best of 3.
They do. I'm ashamed to say this, but like I'm so afraid to spend 5,000 gold when I would very easily, if I was offered appealing cosmetics, I would spend like 4,000 gold if they were in card decks that I would play.
Is best of 3 5,000 gold?
I think it's actually more, but maybe it's 5,000. But the entry is not insignificant, and so it's kind of like I need to figure out how I feel about my deck choice before I just start throwing gold against these things. I mean, I have a bunch of gems that have just sort of sat there for a while, and whenever there's a stonks day, I'm converting gold into gems, or like 400 gems into 500 gems. So that does accumulate slowly. But yeah, I'm still a little bit hesitant to get in there. It's just like the stakes still do scare me, even though it's completely virtual stakes, and it's very easily replaceable by like 4 days of quests or something.
It's funny. I have the same feeling a little bit. I would love to talk a little bit about what these events are, because I know there's been kind of a mixed kind of reception to them, but we'll come back to that in a little bit maybe. But I was going to say, I'm always happy to like fire $10 into the sun on Magic Online, but I do feel much more of risk averse about it on Arena.
Like the free currency is too valuable.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we start with talking a little bit about our impressions of Explorer and what you've been playing and that kind of stuff, Shane?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you and I can have a back and forth conversation about this, because we both played primarily the same or similar decks in Explorer. And I've been mostly playing Rakdos mid, as I mentioned, and I was the first couple days I was essentially playing like old versions of Rakdos that didn't have any new cards. And my co-host Dave did remind me that we do in fact have a podcast where we should talk about new cards. So I pivoted to a version with Ob Nixilis and Tenacious D. This was based, though, on a list that was posted by Pioneer Grinder Baduina. And Tina's list was an adaptation of kind of old Pioneer Rakdos mid decks, but they had 4 Tenacious Ds and 3 Ob Nixilis, and looks like they shaved down a little bit on their other planeswalkers. They only had 2 Chandras. There was no like 3rd Chandra and maybe a Sorin like you see sometimes, and 2 Kroxa instead of maybe 3 like you might see there sometimes. And obviously the idea here was to create this combo of the 2-drop in Tenacious D to the 3 loyalty, 3 mana Ob Nixilis and start doing some work. But there's no Kalitas and no Dreadbore in Explorer. So the version I sort of created had 2 Bedevil, 2 Murderous Rider, if you remember that card, and a 3rd Chandra to replace the 5 cards there.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit too about the deck I was playing. So I got a list from Joe C in our stalwart of our Discord, and that he's been playing, and mine was a little different than where you were at. So I was trying at least one more new card. So mine was I had a Sorin, the Mirthless, in along with my 2 Chandras. So I only had 3 4-drops. I had 3 Ob Nixilis as well, and then I had only 2 Tenacious Underdogs, but had 2 Strangle, 2 Fatal Push, and 2 Bloodchief's Thirst.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit more removal. No
Bedevil though, which is probably a card that I would swap in. And there were a couple other things in there that we could talk about as we go.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that right now, because I think like what you swap in for Dreadbore is kind of up in the air, and I don't love any of the options. Like I think Dreadbore is sneakily a super essential card in this deck, because the 2 mana destroy a planeswalker or creature, even at sorcery speed, is just like kind of it's a big difference between 3 and 2 mana. No matter, even if you get the instant speed, even if you get the ability to hit artifacts, being able to take care of stuff 1 turn earlier or to double spell is so much more important in a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why I like Bloodchief Thirst.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Is that gets you kind of that efficiency.
Some of it, right? But then it's extremely inefficient on the backside when you kill a planeswalker, because it's not like there's any 2 mana planeswalkers in Pioneer to kill or in Explorer to kill. So, but I do like that card. But I thought overall I really enjoyed playing this deck generally.
Yeah.
It just kind of reminded me again of the power of Thoughtseize, but
Does Strangle bridge that gap a little bit between Dreadbore and Bloodchief's Thirst?
That's what I meant to mention also. Great point, Stan. Like, the reason that Strangle, I think, rates in this list is because you can knock off a Planeswalker for a single mana as well. And that's why you don't go all in on either Bloodchief's Thirst or Strangle in the list. So you have kind of just the diversity of options. And I think, by the way, Strangle actually did a pretty good job of that. I do think it's a lot of creatures that you really want to kill in Pioneer have 4 toughness right now, and in Explorer have 4 toughness. So Strangle having a hard cap on that does suck sometimes, but it is worth it to have the single mana target Planeswalker ability.
Yeah, I think if I were to go back, the reason that I put like the Murderous Rider in is just to give me a later game creature, sort of to replace Kalidas and be like the 2-for-1 type thing. But I think that Bedevil might just be too expensive as like a 2-of, maybe like a sideboard option type thing, and maybe add some mixture of Bloodchief's Thirst and or Strangle in there, I think, to handle some creatures. Because one of the things that I found, and this is kind of getting ahead of things, Dave, is I found that because I lacked enough efficient removal to take care of like low to the ground creature decks, I could find myself getting swarmed and getting overwhelmed. If they were a heavy creature, like creature and spell is a lot easier than just kind of like a go wide creature deck. Has always been kind of an issue, I think, for mid-rangey style decks where they only have so many removal spells.
Yeah, I think having 6 single mana removal spells was a good thing that Joe did with the list that he shared with me, for sure.
Yeah,
like that makes a ton of sense to just be cheap, and that is what it is.
So let's go back to Tenacious Underdog a little bit, right? Because that's kind of the 1-2 punch that I think this deck is trying to set up, where it's like, hey, you drop it. I mean, you drop a two-drop Tenacious Underdog, then you can sacrifice it to get another 3 loyalty Ob Nixilis, and then later in the game at some point you can blitz back Tenacious out of the yard. It's an interesting recursive threat that does what you kind of want in Rakdos mid specifically, I think, which is drawing you cards and providing damage on empty boards, or hastily attacking opposing planeswalkers if there are any, things like that.
Yeah. What did you think of this card generally? I only had it as a 2-of.
Tenacious Underdog?
Yeah, you had it as a 4-of, so you were pretty committed to it.
Yeah, I did get to cast it quite a bit, both on its 2 mana value and its 4 mana blitz cost. I liked it quite a bit in a lot of games. I don't think it's busting anything like wide open. I don't think anyone thought it would by any means. But what I like about this card is late game, it's doing what you want in this deck, because like you're getting 3 damage a turn. You're drawing yourself a card, and it costs you 2 life and 4 mana, of course. But what it's good about in this strategy is that like you can keep the board clean. You can use this effect when the opportunity reveals itself to you. It's not like a planeswalker, but it does sort of the planeswalker thing in a deck like this, which is it's drawing me more through my deck, or it's providing me some kind of damage. In Rakdos mid, I think it's therefore probably better sack fodder to Ob than something like in Mono Black Aggro, which might have like Scrappy Scrounger or Bloodsoaked Champion, or even like one of the 1-drop whose name is escaping me that draws you like a card or 2 off the top, because that's just a different type of strategy altogether. And so I think in like a mid-range strategy, Tenacious is pretty darn good, but it's not my favorite 2-drop in the world. It's just like it's a pretty good 2-drop in terms of the actual strategy you're executing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a solid card. I was kind of glad I didn't have it as a 4-of in the list that I was playing, because I feel like it's maybe not powerful enough to be that. I think the great thing about it is that it's another 2-drop that has 3 power, so it lets you put some pressure on your opponent early, in spite of all the trickiness that it has.
Yeah, that's why I think it's really good. Yeah, it blocks well, it attacks well.
Yeah. So I think that, we talked about this card during the spoiler app. I'm glad that we talked about it, because I do think that it's a card that's going to see play in a number of different places. I mean, we even saw a red-black Ob Nixilis deck. I think Everett shared one towards the beginning of New Capenna where he was trying it in Modern. I think he kind of felt like it wasn't good enough for Modern. Probably true. But Tenacious Underdog, I think, is a perfect fit for Explorer, Pioneer kind of power level. And I love the fact that you can blitz it out there to attack from your hand to draw a card if you just want to cycle it and get 3 damage. Basically, it's a good card.
Oh, so you can blitz it from your hand.
Yeah.
Not only from the graveyard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's an interesting option.
That's key because there are some times where you're just like, the board's clear and I need to close this game out. I'm going to try to blitz it and try to draw into more threats. I think it's good.
Yeah, I should do that more. Like I probably had some opportunities for that and like just didn't really see them. But I think that's also good. Yeah, it's a big, weird
dash.
Yes.
Dash variant. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
Stan, have you played against this deck at all? What have you thought about it at all? Or
I played against it at least once. I can't remember like what some of the nuances were between the two versions, and like if I was playing one that was more leaning like on a more aggro or on a more aggressive, or on a more like mid-rangey removal axis. I don't really have much to say except like at least I did get to play against Ob Nixilis and kind of get a sense for what that card is capable of and kind of how it performed, I think, in a vacuum when it just was, sacrificing a random creature to the casualty ability.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Ob.
Certainly the hype card of the weekend, because a lot of people on Twitter were like, it started out with, is this card going to get banned somewhere? Because I think some people are annoyed with it that much, but I don't know. Get into it, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just first things first, my general feeling about Ob is inconsistent for me in this deck. I will trust me that I am not saying that I have the full grasp of what Ob is capable of in every strategy, in a sacrifice strategy, in some kind of Rakdos aggro recursion type strategy. I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking about it in Rakdos mid. And the reason that it feels inconsistent to me is because it's like not usually what I want to be doing early, unless it's against control where I can start pressuring their life total, because they don't really want to start losing cards. Like almost never does control want to start throwing away cards. And
I don't think Midrange wants to lose cards either.
No.
For what it's worth. So I think there's more than control that it's reasonable against, but yeah.
I mean, and I don't think anyone wants to lose cards. And that kind of gets into one of my big issues with it that I want to talk about in like a few sentences. But what I did like about Ob is that like it's pretty good against control because it's two permanents that are hard for them to remove. They provide that ongoing pressure in some way. They can't be swept away with anything besides like Farewell at 6 mana. No, actually that doesn't hit Planeswalkers. So
no, it hits everything other than Planeswalkers. Yeah.
So it's like they can't handle it with their creature removal, and sometimes the burn spells that maybe like a Is It type interactive deck would have aren't enough to get rid of the Ob. But then I have like way less conclusive value with the card against like creature decks, because like they just choose to lose a few life points. They don't want to lose their creatures either, and they're putting more pressure on with those cards than the 2 life loss like matters. Like going back to last week, just talking about math, like I can lose 2 life, or I can attack my opponent for like 3, 5, 6 damage for just if this thing lives for one turn. That's like, well then, yeah, of course I'm not throwing anything away. And so they can just either attack your Obs or they can ignore them. And notice I'm always speaking about Obs in like pairs. Like one Ob is even worse. And so that's just not doing a lot for you, or for me at least.
Yeah. I mean, I think the general, what you're saying is true. What I found to be true about the card too. But I think that there were a bunch of games where it closed the door for me.
Oh yes, soundly.
And so I think it's a good card. You know what I mean? I do think it has troublesome matchups where it's not good. And I think that's great, actually. Like, it's not like we want a card to be good against in all scenarios. I do think that one thing that I didn't get a lot of chances to do, and that I'll probably do more playing these main deck going forward, is making a devil against creature decks instead of even maybe 2. If I have a high enough loyalty from the second Ob Nixilis as well, so that I have some blockers, because that ability that the devils have, where they die and then also do 1 damage to something, actually lets them kill reasonably sized creatures. Yeah. Sometimes, unless you do some weird kind of tricky math as well, that I think can really improve it quite a bit. And so I'm wondering if that helps a little bit with the protection problem with Ob Nixilis or the creature problem with Ob Nixilis.
Yeah.
There's no reason for this card to have a mode that kills a creature. But I do think it's a good tool in a lot of different matchups. And I feel like it's kind of a perfect thing for red-black to have access to.
Yeah. I mean, so the inconsistency, I think, is driven by the choice issue. Like, these Punisher effects, they give your opponent a choice on what a spell or ability or something does to them. And that, I think, is the major source of inconsistency of him as a walker. Like, you've heard probably since the first few months of you playing Magic the Gathering is that your life total is a resource and you can use it. And that's a very real option for opponents that are facing down 1 ob, even 2 obs. Like, 4 life a turn sounds like a lot. And then, but if your opponent has these threats in hand and or any kind of damage, they're not going to want to discard those. They're just going to kill you and not worry about losing 4 life if the clock is not on you, the Ob Nixilis player's side. And what did you feel about that, Dave? Were you like, what did you find your opponents doing much of the time, like in Rakdos mid?
I mean, really hard to say, right? I mean, I think the power play here is post board with this. You have, I mean, I was so frequently sideboarding in all my duresses and go blanks as well, so that I was kind of like, okay, I'm Ob Nixilis and I have a ton of discard spells. And so I'm going to plus Ob Nixilis, and if you take the damage, I'm going to make you, then I know that you have a card you want to hold on to, then I'm going to Thoughtseize you. Like, I think it made Thoughtseize a better card late game than it can be sometimes, because when they have something they're trying to protect a little bit more. And if it's like, if they discard, then I just hold my discard spells until later, because obviously I don't care. That kind of thing. Or I just pick their hand apart just to be like, okay, I'm going to ob you twice, and then I'm going to cast Go Blank, and then then you're really going to be over it, and then I'm going to win. So I do think that it's a powerful tool in that way, the way that Liliana the Veil's discard ability can be powerful, even though it's doesn't have any fringe benefits, you know what I mean? Like the way that this one does. I do think the choice thing is a problem, but I also think that if you are, I didn't ever feel like it was enough of a problem that Ob was not presenting a problem they had to deal with.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, I was generally in a position where I was getting to have more cards than them. Ob Nixilis makes it even worse. And then, sometimes I kill them with it. I mean, I killed somebody in one game with Ob's ult, even.
Nice.
Where I got up to 7. I made them discard a bunch. It was like a longer game, got them to 7 life, and then just hit them with the -7 from one of the Obs, and they died.
Yeah.
And that was good. That was probably not going to happen that much, but
yeah, I think what in Rakdos mid, like, Ob feels like I don't know if it's borderline or questionable or like just okay, but it's like it's not some option where I'm like, this is a must include, because like, I feel like if I was pressuring the opponent's life total more, then they would have less of a choice. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I think we've seen kind of these Rakdos aggro decks that we've hinted about last week or maybe 2 weeks ago in our spoiler episode. And then it's like, we're starting to see some of those. We're like, here's an aggressive Rakdos deck where Ob synergizes with the creatures, and the creatures are also hitting pretty hard and recurring themselves, so that if Ob is surviving, then they're not going to have as much of a choice, because their life total will be like 8 instead of like 16. Because I feel like, I don't know what your experiences with the deck were, but I just, the clock that we're presenting is not incredible. It's definitely a take over the mid to late game type thing.
Yeah, and I think Ob Nixilis helps a lot with that.
So I've been paying attention. There's so much I want to react to. For starters, Shane, you mentioned you talk about Obs. I don't think this is a card you ever cast unless you can make 2. Like, do you guys kind of just agree with that? Probably. Like, it's a corner case if you're just going to put out the one, and you're doing that if like somehow he's going to close out the game on his own,
right?
Essentially.
And you want to know the card that helps with that the most? Honestly, it's not Tenacious Underdog. To make sure that you cast 2 in this shell, it's Fable of the Mirror Breaker. That's the card that I found myself more often being like, okay, I have my beaters out there. They killed my Blood Tithe Harvester. They killed my Tenacious Underdog. I'm waiting to bring that back. I Fable on one turn. Next turn I do my draw, my Rummage effect, and then I get rid of the token Ob Nixilis, and that I found that line coming up much more frequently. Honestly,
Yeah, that's really cool. And I want to double check. Were you guys playing Croxa?
Yeah.
Yes.
2 of. Yeah.
So the thing for me with Ob, just playing against it, is I feel like it's another win con for this deck in a similar way that Croxa is. And like, it's not going to do its thing unless the game has gone long enough. But then once it's on the board, like assuming you've been playing to your plan and just like trading resources a lot and applying early pressure with cheap threats, like that's when your pair of adversaries sort of take over the game and eventually win.
Yeah.
Does that kind of sit right with your experiences?
Yeah, I actually think I don't like it early, which is perhaps surprising. Like maybe there's a few matchups where I would not mind having 2 planeswalkers down, but like a lot of times I need to keep a creature back. Like against an opposing creature deck, I don't want to sacrifice a blocker or an attacker just to have obs down.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think you're casting it early unless it's against control that's tapped out against you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially in Pio and Explorer where they don't have no mana interaction, but
yeah, and maybe this goes without saying, but I think you can cast it early if you have 2 in your hand. And the reason you might want to do that just to play that early one is because it's such a pesky permanent that I think people think they need to or want to remove as soon as possible. So if you can get like a couple cards out of their hand just for the sake of them interacting with your Ob and its clone, I think that may be worth it so that then like the second one is the thing that actually closes it out.
Yeah, it just depends on the board state.
Yes,
right?
100%.
If they have a bunch of creatures, like I'm not going to cast Ob Nixilis into where I have 1 creature, they have 2 or 3 creatures, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to sacrifice my 1 creature and just have it die in a crackback, even if I plus it twice, because most likely, because it's a Punisher effect, they're not going to discard. No. Right? They're probably in that position. They're probably going to take damage. So you're playing whatever other 3-drop you have then, whether it's Fable, whether it's, whatever. But
that kind of gets to my issue with it, where it's like I've talked about the consistency in terms of what this card is doing on particular board states. And I just feel like I'm not sure if I wouldn't rather have a different 3-drop or like a different planeswalker or just something else that's in this deck in Rakdos Mid, again, specifically, that couldn't do the same thing, but could have a wider variety of application that I was comfortable having in my deck.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should kind of try to deconstruct what you mean by do this thing, because what this thing does in the case of Ob Nixilis is it applies pressure or it's trading on cards.
Well, it's either applies pressure or trades on cards. It's just your opponent gets to choose.
Yeah,
right.
And the pressure is.
But those are bad choices for the opponent.
Yeah,
right.
But the pressure is just okay though, in my opinion. Like, there's just so many times where it's like, even if you had 2 obs sitting on the board for like 2 turns, they could still just kill you. Like a mono blue spirits player could out aggro you. A Winota player could out aggro you. Like if let's say you just had a few more removal spells or something like that.
So I found, for what it's worth, that this deck destroys Winota for some reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of removal on the sideboard for sure.
I didn't lose to Winota. I played it 4 times. I didn't lose a single match to Winota with this deck. The Spirits example makes sense. Here's what I think this card does that's important, though. It's that it's a cheaper version of, in my mind, it's like a cheaper version of Chandra Torch of Defiance, which is one of the true heroes of this deck.
Yeah, I think Chandra is so much better.
Well, yeah, it is. It costs 1 more mana.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think that getting to play this a little bit earlier or having a different dimension of the Planeswalker as a kill condition that sometimes does some other things for you, I think is really important for this deck to have to make it actually viable. And I think it works really well because, like you said, it doesn't die to creature removal, right? It doesn't die to sweepers. And you can go Ob Nixilis into Chandra, or you can go play Chandra first and clear the board and then play Ob Nixilis once you've minus Chandra, to kill one of their bigger creatures. And the next turn you play Ob Nixilis. So I think the 2 of them go together extremely well. Yeah. And they both do the 2 damage thing. And so once you start get going with that, and you can have more than one of them in play at a time, right?
Yeah.
You can't have 2 Chandras in play. You can
Sadly.
have 2 Ob Nixilis and a Chandra in play, and then you're really cooking for the late game. And so that's part of what I thought was really good about this card is in conjunction with that card as well. It's like I think that if Chandra didn't exist, it probably wouldn't, it would be tough to make this game plan work for Ob Nixilis, but I think because it does, it fits in well.
Yeah, I just feel like the floor to ceiling delta is a little bit higher than I'd like, but I think that there are times in certain metas, like let's say Azorius control gets like Supreme Verdict and it's like 15% of the ladder, like of the meta, like in events and ladders, and then sure, it's even better to have 3 in your main deck. But if there are a lot of small creature decks in the meta that might have even more creatures than, let's say, Winota that we're pretty strong against, I feel like, well, maybe I'd want to shave my Obs and have more in the sideboard for those control matchups. So right now, I think people are high on it, and they're like, let's just jam 3 and see how it feels.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being a sideboard card sometimes, I think is what you're saying. I think it's really good, but I think there's some chances where it's not going to see main deck play all the time. But I do think it's a legit playable.
Yeah, it's definitely playable. It does not feel broken. I'm glad it doesn't feel broken. Like, I didn't want to have some kind of new 3-mana Planeswalker Overlord that I saw everywhere and felt horrible to play against. So I'm glad that's not the case yet.
Yeah, give it time, Shane. Do you think Rakdos mid, just like a standard mid-range deck, is the best home for Ob? Or do you think there may be an opportunity to find like a way to make either the casualty ability more broken, or mitigate a little bit of the Punisher effect?
Yeah, that's
because I feel like, we're talking about a card that we've only had access to for 4 days. Like, there's still probably room to find a way to actually make it like something worth exploiting, since it is 2 walkers for 3 mana.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that the Pio list that we looked at that was mono black aggro plus Ob Nixilis might be more the type of thing where you're just like playing a lot of creatures and then you have a lot of stuff to help protect Ob Nixilis, and you get to just like throw this out there. Like Shane was saying, if you play a smaller aggressive creature plan and then have this to try to close the door, it might be better just because it's surrounded by more support then.
Yeah, I saw a list on like Arena Zone that is a Rakdos aggro deck that is kind of like the aggressive version of this deck, which is Bomat Courier, Soulscar Mage, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Kari Zev, Bonecrusher Giant, and then has 3 Ob Nixilis. So you could either sacrifice some fast fodder. In fact, you could also sacrifice a pumped up Soulscar Mage if you were so inclined, and then your Ob comes down, Scrap Heap Scrounger for value, things like that. And I had 98% of this deck, so I just built this one tonight, and I'm excited to test a slightly more aggressive deck where, again, the Ob Nixilis life total pressure would be perhaps more impactful.
I liked this deck, though. I'm definitely going to keep playing the mid-range version. I'll keep playing Ob Nixilis main for now.
Yeah.
And see where it goes. The card I hated in this deck, honestly, was Sorin the Mirthless. I'm like, this card.
Oh, man. I've had such good experiences, though, but yeah, it's like slightly less consistent. But
I just want another Chandra. I'm just going to, I guess I can't really put a third Chandra in because then if you draw both, it kind of sucks, but yeah. I don't know.
Sorin's pretty cool. I mean, overall, I think Rakdos feels like you might expect. Like, there's some hits, some misses. I think there's some decks that can just outvalue you, go over the top, but it's traditional mid-range stuff where some days it's great, some days you Thoughtseize and duress everything you need to, some days you remove all the creatures you need to, and sometimes you run out of removal or your creatures aren't strong enough to clock your opponent and they sweep you away. There's just, it's a fun deck. I like all the decisions in it.
So before we get out of here and talk about what Stan's been up to in Pioneer, what did you think about Explorer as a format? Anything that you guys want to note about the format itself?
Winota is good.
Yeah, Winota's really good.
Sure is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, like I said, I faced it over and over again. I did not lose to it.
I mean, there's a reason our deck's probably running like 3 Noxious Grasps and like the Ray of Enfeeblement and all that kind of stuff, right?
I didn't have any of that stuff.
What?
I should have some more. Honestly, I just kill all the small creatures, and then Winota itself can't really do all that much on its own.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think unless you're playing removal pile, Winota is outrageously strong.
Yeah.
Really, really quite good. And I think it's on most people's short list for like probably should and will be banned at some point if we're starting to pay attention to this format more strongly. Mono red, I think, feels surprisingly decent. I know it's doing really well in a lot of people's best of one reporting. I haven't messed around with it in the best of one, but some people are like, yeah, I won my fifth event, my fifth best of one event with mono red aggro.
So is this like low to the ground ones and twos, or is this up to Torbran?
It's mostly the one. It's essentially a lot like the historic one or the Pioneer one we've been playing, Stan, where it's like the historic version where it's like, your Kari Zevs, your Bone Crusher Giants, your Soulscar Mages, and Kumano Faces Kakazan and stuff like that. I think it's just and Chandra 3. And
it's just no Monastery Swiftspear, but all the other cards.
Yeah,
basically.
no Eidolon either is kind of a big loss.
Yeah,
but it's like good enough because I've been playing a very similar deck in Historic, and I think it does get the job done a lot. So I think if I do ever have a reason to mess around with best of one, like if I just want to bust out a best of one event, I will 100% be taking mono red because I know how to play it.
This is the next deck I'm going to craft just because.
Why not?
Why not?
You need a fast one.
Yeah, I got another one that I've faced a few times that I've been impressed with, and that's called Mardu Greasefang.
Okay.
Like, they just combo really quickly, and then Parhelion 2 plus 8 power of angels, like, is good.
Yeah.
I've seen a surprisingly light amount of Greasefang in my games.
I lost. That was one of the decks that I lost to when I was playing this week, and it definitely makes me feel like I should have at least one Bedevil main or something so that I can have some out to an artifact. But
yeah, I mean, I wonder what if it's instead of Bedevil, it's just like
Kolaghan's Command
or a very cheap form of Graveyard Hate, like
that too.
Lantern.
Well, so you already have. There's already Graveyard Hate here, and you have a Graveyard Trespasser, so you have some main deck graveyard stuff. It's just like one extra release valve.
Yeah, K Command is probably the juice.
Hive of the Tyrant is also fun. It's a nice one.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen a lot of the Fires of Invention deck? Because I've been seeing a lot of fires.
I lost to that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just it outvalues what we're doing so hard. This card's dangerous. Like, it's definitely a card with busted potential. It's banned in Historic. It was banned in Standard. Is that correct?
Yeah,
so just like this card has a lot of potential. The Fires strategies and what it does is pretty wild. So pack your Enchantment Hate in your sideboard because I think people like playing this strategy for sure. Like, I definitely got some Feed the Swarms in my sideboard now.
A lot of Rakdos mid. I played a lot of Mirrors and Rakdos Sack, of course.
I haven't seen a lot of Sack, interestingly. How are you feeling like its power level is?
It feels like the same deck to me. I mean, it just feels like a more consistent version because it has Oni Cult too. And so they're kind of doing all those things, but it feels mostly like the same deck as it always felt like.
You know what was frustrating to face down was mono blue spirits.
Yes.
Like, it's just like,
really?
The counterspell package is so strong. The flash abilities are strong. The mana leak effect, the
Geistlight.
Yeah, Geistlight it's outrageous. Like, it feels cheaper than it is even. Like, you just have to play around it so annoyingly. Well, that's the real issue with like a blue tempo deck, right? It's just like having the false tempo that it creates where it's like, I'd like to feel like I can just jam into this and make them have it, but if they do, I am screwed. And or if they flash in a Rattle Chains here, then I'm also kind of screwed. Like, you have to worry about your timing so much more significantly, and it kind of is a real drag, and they can just have it when they need it often. And I think it's a pretty strong deck. I think it's another reason that it's strong is like Azorius is lacking a true 4-mana sweeper. Mm-hmm. And the creatures can grow out of the damage-based sweeper's range, I think, pretty quickly. And so I think it makes the creatures here pretty sticky more than usual. And I think that makes it a potentially stronger option than it might be in real Pioneer, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the cards I've been seeing the Explore version play is Spectral Adversary. Mm-hmm. Like, is that putting in the work? Because it costs 4 mana just to like make this a 3/2 flash and then phase out something.
Yeah, the list that I started out with, so I've played this a little bit. I played it after Explore was announced, but before the format was there, so I was playing it in Historic. And it is pricey. Adversary is pricey. And I think it's a nice thing to have like a one-of, like the Pioneer list that we see have it as a one-of. But, I don't think it's a staple. I think it's just a good option to have around for now. And
speaking of Azorius Control, I did see a lot of that. The main thing I want to talk about in that deck is Wandering Emperor, because I feel like Wandering Emperor is, as Stan thought it would be, at least in Pioneer, it's a real threat. Like it does something novel that I think a lot of Azorius Planeswalkers didn't do before, which is create an army in a can. And that can be really frustrating for a deck that needs removal. So like it's just it's a must remove threat that has vigilance threat, like, blockers. And so it's doing a lot, I think, for the format.
Yeah. And then last couple decks that we're seeing around, Is It Dragons, which is really cool, and Arcalite Phoenix, of course, lots of flying threats.
Is It Dragons is actually the deck that I'm playing. I've got going in an event right now.
Sweet.
And it's fun. No new cards, but it is fun.
Nice. And then Greasefang, like we talked about, and Green Ram, people are still trying that strategy. It's funny, when you look at this list that you put together, Shane, pretty much just feels like Pioneer without Lotus Field to me in some ways. Like, it's people trying most of the decks
Fine with me
in Pioneer except for Lotus. But speaking of Pioneer, Stan, I know you've been doing some fun stuff in Pioneer with new cards. What have you been up to?
Oh, guys, I did the thing that we never do.
You brewed.
I brewed.
I brooded.
I did a brooded.
Oh no, wrong podcast, buddy.
Call Dan.
Cave Dan, if you're listening, have me on the show. I need your help. The reason we never brew is just because, like, it's not often that inspiration strikes, but I guess I was in the right time in the right place when I found out about a little card called Getaway Car. So I'm going to read this one really quick because we did not talk about it in our spoiler episode. It's a 3 generic mana vehicle, 4/3 haste, crew 1. And when Getaway Car attacks or blocks, you can return up to 1 target creature that crewed it this turn to its owner's hand. And you must return that creature. It's not a mana ability. And when I saw that card, I just thought it was really neat. And I don't know what it is about it that struck me, but I thought it was a nice new 3-mana addition into this family of cards that we see. Soul Herder and Eldrazi Displacer, just something that, wants to maximize blinking stuff. And as I started kind of just like thinking about what would have to make this card good, it really just felt like everything I'd want to play was Pioneer legal. So that's what I ended up doing. I will say the thing that I find really interesting about this card, and I think the actual line that made me interested in the first place, is that it's swings for 4, but it's a crew 1. And that's such a low hurdle to jump over that it seemed like it's worth trying to make that good. And
it has haste too, doesn't it? Does it have haste?
It does.
Yeah, which is sweet.
Yeah. So just to run down really quickly what the deck I put together to test this theory, it's essentially a black-white deck with just creatures that cantrip when they enter the battlefield. So I got 4 copies of Spirited Companion, which is that 1/1 enchantment dog. When it enters, you draw a card, and 4 copies of Dark Legion Zealot, and 4 copies of Thraben Inspector. So those are my cantrippers. I put 4 copies of Charming Prince in there just because that card does a lot. Works well with my other blinkers. Filters my draws. Sometimes it buffers my life total. And then I also realized that, like, if I don't have Getaway Car, I need to make these really bad creatures good. So I threw in Intrepid Adversary.
That's a cool card.
It is a cool card. This is from Adventures of the Forgotten Realm. 1 and a white for a 3/1 lifelinker. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many Valor counters on it, and creatures you control get +1/+1 for each Valor counter on it. And then to round it out, I got some wedding announcements to make more tokens, and then also buff all my creatures, Skyclave Apparitions. And another new card I tried is Extraction Specialist, which is 2 and a white for a 3/2 lifelinker. When Specialist enters the battlefield, return target creature with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature can't attack or block for as long as you control Extraction Specialist, but that creature can crew. And usually that creature draws me a card anyway. So I think you kind of get the gist, right? Like, I'm trying to find cheap creatures with value-esque ETB effects. In the case of Skyclave Apparition, maybe it helps get blockers out of the way or answer other problematic permanents. And I ran it through a league, and I got a 3/2. I burritoed.
Nice. Brew validated.
Brew validated. And I gotta say, like, when I
Deck is
first put
legit.
this deck, yeah, it's the truth. When I first put this deck together, I was very honest with myself and I was like, this just looks like a kitchen table deck. If I'm being truly honest with myself, like, I didn't think I was doing anything particularly like explosive or uniquely powerful. I just thought like it was a fun thing to play casually. And then I shared it with the Discord and like Mickey and Emma kind of were into it. And Spencer, like, they gave me very positive reinforcement. So then I just like kept thinking about it. And also because I built a black-white deck, like, I thought the mana was really good. And I think that's something that's really important with just brews in general. Like, if you can have good mana, I think that adds like some percentage points to it.
Man, don't get greedy.
You have the 4 fast lands, you got the shock lands, you got the new shattered slow land, the shattered sanctums. And then you have some like pretty good creature lands. I played 1 hive and a couple cave of frost dragon. And then 4 bright climb pathway. And one of the reasons the mana is so good is that main deck, you only run 1 black card, the Dusk Legion Zealot, and everything else is white. So as long as you have like a single black source or maybe 2 if you're replaying Dark Legion Zealot with one of your other blink effects, like, it just, everything is super, super castable. I should add my top end was Wandering Emperor, just like to have a good card in there.
Yeah.
You got
Good
to
cards are
play
good.
that one.
Yeah. So the results of my league, I mentioned I got a 3-2. I lost to Mono Green and I lost to Is It Dragons, the Aspiring Spike deck. So I figured like maybe I can't beat aggro and like I had either need to fix my sideboard or, you know, play some kind of sweeper or more removal spells. I don't know. I did end up beating Lotus Field 2-0, Blue White Control 2-1, and then I beat Mono Red 2-0. Yeah, so like maybe the right draws can actually beat some aggro decks
Real
in the
decks.
case of Mono Red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Did you have fun? Was it fun?
It was a lot of fun, yeah. And the games were grindy. And maybe that's what you should expect from a deck full of like 1/1s that do not much else other than draw you a card. Ultimately, here's what I found. Getaway car is fine. And the thing that it was really best at is A, redrawing these cantrippers to like draw into other good stuff. And B, it just trades with everything. So the fact that it's 4 power, like, people know that you kind of have to block it, 'cause otherwise it's just going to keep drawing you cards. But whenever they block it, it's killing whatever's blocking it. So it's this removal spell that can sometimes cantrip for you. And for that reason, it turned out to be somewhat playable. Extraction Specialist was also pretty cool. Just 3/2 lifelinker, like, those are decent stats. And because every time you're casting it, you're bringing something back that gets you through your deck more. One of the reasons why I was able to beat Control and Lotus Field at least is I just ended up burying my opponents in card advantage. Like, I would have a full hand and my Control opponent was hellbent.
Wow. Okay.
Which is just a position that I never thought I'd be in. And here we are talking about it. The cards that really impressed me the most, though, were Intrepid Adversary and Wedding Announcement, as these like aggressive, proactive ways to make my board huge. And I shared this one screenshot in our Pioneer channel where I won a game against Angels in another league I did that I haven't finished yet, where I just have a board full of like 5/5s and 6/6s. And that includes my Spirited Companions and Charming Princes, just because it went long enough that I was able to flip a Wedding Announcement and play like a really big Intrepid Adversary. And that's sort of what I think this deck does, is that it takes like this white weenies aggressive strategy, lets you see a lot of your deck so that if you need Skyclave Apparitions or if you need a Wandering Emperor, your chances are higher to find them. And then eventually, like, if you're able to remain somewhat stable, you can actually turn all of your cheap 1 and 2 drops into like very potent threats that'll just kind of one-shot the opponent.
I hadn't really looked at Wedding Announcement before. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Here's what I'll say. The hard part about brewing is not coming up with a deck and like a cool card that you build a synergy around. I think the hardest part, for me at least, is the polishing and like being really honest with myself about what's putting in the most work, what you lean into, and how you start solving problems. And that's the thing that I think the good brewers excel at, and the bad brewers just, at least in my case, like maybe I'm lacking the wealth of knowledge of synergies and like actual untapped potential about cards that we don't see in the metagame to to hearken towards. Maybe it's just a matter of playing a lot of leagues and just taking good notes about like what cards are unimpressive and what cards actually pull their weight. In this case, it's hard because none of the cards are impressive. Like I'm playing 4th Raven Inspector and then hoping I recast them over and over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can invite myself onto Faithless Brewing and they can teach me how to brew, because if nothing else, like not only was the cards I played fun, the deck actually managed to close out against like real opponents playing actual meta strategies. And what I ultimately found was this thing can grind. And what you lose to is the decks that just go bigger than you. And maybe there's a way to either square that circle or find a way to, like, if I'm drawing all these cards, like actually find some kind of combo off approach that wins the game because I have all these powerful ETB effects and exploits that facet.
Maybe it's a Book of Exalted Deeds and Mutavault or something like that. In the side as well or something. I don't know.
I'll if I keep playing it, I'll let you know what I find. Maybe I can challenge myself to squeeze out a trophy, and then someone else will notice it and we'll iterate on it.
Wow,
very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that closes out our show for this week. We will of course be back next week with, I'm sure, more new cards from Streets of New Capenna. See how things shake out after there's an actual full week. There was a 5K at SCG today that ended today that we haven't got a chance to dive into the results too much of. So there's going to be a lot of data coming up. Let's see what happens. Let's see if Luxior shows up in Modern. Let's see what other things we're waiting to see. But I think, strong first week for Ob Nixilis. Strong first week for Stan's brew. See where it goes from there.
1 QP, baby.
Nice.
All right, that does wrap up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. Get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a rating and review. Also, make sure to check out our Twitter account because we are going to be posting some giveaways there from the Beetle and Grimm Kamigawa Platinum Edition. Got some posters, deck box, sleeves, bunch of stuff that I don't want, but maybe someone else out there does. Find us over at The Dive Down, all one word. Of course, you can also email thedivedown@gmail.com if you ever want to reach out to us for any other reason. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can even support us while playing Magic with a Mana Traders account. Using promo code TheDiveDown2022, all one word, gets you 15% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. You can use that same code over at Barrister and Man to get 15% off your first order of a Barrister and Man product. Shaving soap, other fragrances, regular soap for your body, aftershave. They got it all over at Barrister and Man. Again, that promo code is TheDiveDown2022. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and play more OBS.
You've been listening to Cool Decks Inc. with Dave, the Godfather.
Sleeve it up.
Sleeve it.